Thank you, Andre, and thank you everybody for joining us. If this is your first time, welcome to the Product People community. And we are a group of product enthusiasts, and we love to be sharing knowledge and bringing best practices of product and making sure that the community feels as though we are a collective unit in making sure that products are being delivered in an awesome fashion. Now, if you didn't hear my previous announcement, we are recording this. If you don't want yourself to be recorded, please make sure that your cameras are turned off. And any comments that you might have, you're going to be muted throughout this process. So if there's any comments that you might have, please enter them into the chat in whichever one of the various streaming platforms that you are using, and we'll do our best to ensure that your question is asked and answered. So today we are talking about responsible product management with Alexander Steinhart. He would describe himself as a product person. He's been spending 5 years at ThoughtWorks doing strategy consulting for a bunch of different companies. And today we're going to be talking about good practices with respect to societal or environmental concerns. I'm not going to steal too much of his thunder. He's going to give himself more of an introduction going forward. But just wanted to give everybody a primer. This is a pretty cool topic. I'm looking forward to it. And thank you in advance, Alexander, for joining us. Before we do so, oh, my screen is a little funky. A little bit about me. I'm John Freeman. I'm a product person at Product People. I'm an associate product manager too. I've got 5+ years in product and project management skills. I've been with Product People for a few months now, really enjoying myself. And a lot of time I've spent has been in automated retail, playing with robots, having them do things that normally you would do at a store with somebody interacting with you. But I like robots. They're kind of cool. And who are Product People? We are interim product managers, and what we do is we provide a consultative service, so to speak. If your company is currently in a situation where you have a gap between your product person leaving for some reason, perhaps it's a paternity leave, perhaps it is because there's a gap in time before your new product person can join the organization. We fill in that gap and we ensure that the train keeps rolling while the organization is pushing forward before they can find a permanent replacement. In addition to that, we provide sort of presentations like this, as well as any sort of insights that we might gain from the various experiences that we have, so we can share best practices and ensure that the product community is growing and being better. And this is part of that today, and we also provide coaching as well. I'll talk more about that going forward. So there we go. Whoa, and we skipped ahead. All right. And so again, I already introduced Alex a little bit, but today he's going to be taking over and talking through, the good practices with respect to societal and environmental concerns with respect to product management. I'm looking forward to hearing this. And Alex, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing and hand this over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, John. Thank you for having me. I'm very happy to have everybody here. Let's see if I can share my screen here. And I see you as well. Let's see. To make it larger, that I have some faces. Thank you. Welcome everybody to responsible product management and how we can shape a better future with this one. My name is Alexander Steinhart. I've got a background in social science, psychology, and also in the NGO world. Before I went into the startup world, had my own startup, and then I joined ThoughtWorks as a consultant 5 years ago. Had various roles in there, mostly related to all things of product, like product owner, proxy product owner, agile coach, scrum master, consultant for organizational development, but also lead for responsible tech. And here are some of the learnings, what I learned over the last years when it comes to responsible product management, and also why that is relevant today. Before we go into that one, just maybe one more thing about ThoughtWorks. ThoughtWorks is a global technology consultancy that integrates strategy, design, and software engineering. There are over 12,000 people worldwide. It exists over 25 years, and so really loads of people. And as we are really large by now, I think there's quite some knowledge across the different clients and industries. I think over the last 5 years, I worked like in 10 different clients in 4 or 5 different industries. And also with responsible tech, I'm really in exchange with quite a lot of people. And I think that's really nice to see, and also to see what are common practices behind that one. And I think that's also added value with product people and the network, just to gain those knowledge, which are just like beyond the industry and the setting, and really to improve the practice there. ThoughtWorks is also known in spreading thought leadership. As product people, we also love to share the knowledge, increase the learning, the competency in the general communities in there. And as a client of ours said, like there are many books you can read, but with ThoughtWorks, you have like the people who really have written them. So there are over 100 books written, especially when it comes to development, especially when it comes to agile practices. There are really, really loads of books in there. And I think that's really great to have those conversations also within ThoughtWorks about like, what's the standard, how do we get there, and all the knowledge which is around there. Coming to the topic, why do we talk about responsible tech? And I think to start with, I think it's about value, which we have there, and like that we want to create value. And like the people maybe here in Zoom, if you want to put in like, what's for you the value? Like what's value itself? Maybe there are some comments. If you're on LinkedIn or YouTube or another platform, please feel free to also put it in. But on Zoom, I will see them directly, and maybe after we have a couple, the other one will come from Andre. What would you say is value as a product manager? Like, what do you look after? It takes a bit until we get the ones in there. So problem solving solution I have already in there. Thank you. What else is value? What is it for you? Also for you personally, maybe ensuring minimum delivery to solve problems, saving cost, making people happy to use our products. Also a nice one. Happy customers. Also a nice one. Or making people happy. I look after communication between teams to go deep into the core problem, opportunity to deliver a return of investment for business and customers. So not just the customers, but also the business. Nice one. I think there are more coming via the LinkedIn. I'm going to see them then later in there. When you look into the direction, Cambridge Directionary, it's like the importance, usefulness, or worth of something to someone for someone. So really like it's quite broad, but it's really like the importance, usefulness, worth, which is in there. And I think it comes to the relation when it comes really to the business, to the customer, where there's value in there. And I think quite a lot of you look at that interaction and navigating that towards tech. And I think many of you also know that one from IDEO, where there is innovation in there. And I think we look quite often at the intersection here, like the viability, the desirability, so the value for the business, but also the value for the customers. But we also navigate the visibility in terms of the technical part. And for quite often, like that's like the part of the product management, or where the product is really navigating that one, and the product is in the core there. And the product management practice is like somehow navigating this over time, finding it out, and then really like iteratively delivering that value over time and seeing how that could grow. And I think this is just growing. That's why we talk about it. And in ThoughtWorks, we talk quite a lot, like there's the fourth revolution, and tech is really coming to the core of the business. So like in the past, it was a supporting role, but now there's more and more tech at core. So it's not just a differentiation, but many companies just like the tech is the company. When you think of Apple, when you think of Google, when you think of other companies, Spotify or whatever, like the tech product is the company, and it's not just an add-on. And I think next to that one, it's not just that happening. I think in many companies it's slowly happening, but I think the reality is there, and in the future much more will be there. But what's also happening over time is that tech becomes also the core of society, and quite a lot is running in there. And I think with that, element in here that tech is at the core of society and not just like a supporting role, but really such a central role, there comes also some more responsibility in there. And I think with this one, we have to talk about it. And when it comes to that one and to the responsibility in there, like my next question is like, what comes to your mind when you think of technology being problematic? So like, have you anything heard in the news or from personal experiences where you really see like, okay, when technology is at the center of society or the individual, like what might go wrong? Like anything that comes to your mind there? Again, I'm gonna see the comments on Zoom faster than the ones on LinkedIn or on YouTube, but please feel free to comment in there. When is technology problematic? When do you think we should live up more to our responsibility we have? Continuous change in security is one of the comments. So data leakage, which might be there, abuse of the system then. What else? The complexity for the average user, yeah. Fraudulent activities, so app use once more in there. Slow performance, taking a couple of attempts to performance in action. So really when it comes to efficiency in there and usability. Too many options to perform the same thing. Hype over implementation, using it where it's not supposed to be use XT. So app use as well. It might be app use of the normal user, but it might also be user groups which you haven't thought of and they are using it. They might be app using it, but they might also be groups you haven't thought of while they are using it. So minorities, for example, or like people with accessibility needs. Anything else? So many options in the market, yeah. I think there's quite a lot around in there, like how the usability is and the performance, but there are many more things when you think about in society, how technology is used or like what are the issues. So like going in there, like I think many of you know there's like the bias in there, like the machine bias, which is happening. And I think many people are aware by today of it. And I think there was a hype also for human resource and hiring to use like some automated algorithms to filter it. And I think by now, like every company is very aware of that software and really is asking like, what do you do in order to reduce the bias? And I think there are many articles on that one. And there's also in terms like when people got arrested in terms of the likelihood, like on the right side, I think the left person got a lower risk rating and was then again like becoming more was put in jail again because he was just like being breaking the law again than Prisha on the right, just based on some rating on the history, not on a situation, but it was just like completely falsely predicted by the algorithms. There's more in terms when you come to Apple, like with the AirTag. I think when they released it, there was a huge call and quite some abuse of it, that just people got stalked by it, women got stalked by it. And it took Apple like 8 months to realize the AirTags to have more privacy features in there and get notifications when you are followed by an AirTag which doesn't belong to you, like 8 months in there, 8 months when people got stalked in there. So there's really like a big issue where there was like technology released, but it also had a big impact on society in terms of it is and a big impact on the users in there. And it might not be an issue for you, but it might be an issue for you users. And I think having the empathy and really like anticipating this one is quite important nowadays, because you have such a responsibility. And it might be nice when your core group really finds it useful, but it's really not good for your PR and for your company and for the users when there are like unintended consequences with really negative impacts, and especially negative impacts when people get stalked and followed by other people. So that's really a big issue, and also a security concern and safety concern for those people. Another one is, of course, like Bitcoin's environmental damage in there, in terms like what's the usage in terms of energy, especially when it comes to our environment nowadays. I think we also should like look into, hey, what's the footprint of the software we are doing? What's the footprint of the product we are building? I think we shouldn't ignore those nowadays. And there are many little things that can have far-reaching consequences. And when you look in the media and when you look out, I think there are many effects in terms like how society or how technology has impact on society nowadays. And with this one, and I think with most people, is when you today accept like a consent banner, or when you use a new product, it doesn't feel completely right. Like we always, even people working in tech, like with a new product, I think everybody is skeptical because everybody knows what's the trade-off? Do I give my data? Do I have more technology in my life? What's happening? And I think that's just like also representing in this one from the Edelman trust parameter. It's just like that there's less trust in the technology sector today. And I think when it comes to technological solutions, there's also this trust decrease nowadays. But it's not just about like the impact there is and the trust which is decreasing. I think there's also that we are in the middle of an environmental challenge. And when you look at the IPCC report, which just came out, I think there's a very short window where we really have to look into like, how do we change our ways of working, and how do we really create a future, you know, like which our customers want, but also their children want. And I think there's more and more expectation coming also from, not just from the world, and I think for our own conscious, but also like our customers are much more aware and they are much more looking out for those elements. And so there is the need for more systemic thinking. So like there is the economy in the middle, but like it's the three nested dependencies. So like really like business is part of society and society is part of the planet. And I think like it means when the society and the environment is doing well, also the business is doing well for most cases. You might have a business model which is like built on chaos, but I think for most cases, your business model is rather based on that the society and the environment is doing well. And I think that should be represented also in the product management you do today. And I think here our profession really needs to incorporate more systemic thinking in there, and we go into more details in a second there. So we just saw this before. So you have the ideas Venn diagram in there. And I think this one just needs to improve here. So like we need to have a more sustainable innovation. And I think beyond just having the viability, desirability, and enforceability, I think there's the responsibility to the individual, to society, and to the environment. Normally people just talk about the society and the environment, but I think there's also the responsibility to the individual. When, as with the case of Instagram, when teens are getting addicted, when they have body issues, I think it's not the problem of the teens, but it's our responsibility of product managers that we make them addicted, that they have body issues, and it's not there. So I think we should face it and really also take on that responsibility and navigate that in a better way. So yeah, responsible product management is just like taking that full picture into place. Why to act now? So there are many consumers in there, like on the bottom left. 93% of the consumer in a Salesforce ethical leadership report says that they really look into the companies, that they have to say that companies have the responsibility to look beyond profit and really positively impact society. 75% of the consumers would consider not buying from a company that demonstrate poor ethics, and 52% of consumers say that they are more worried about technological ethical usage than they have been a year ago. A couple of days, there was also a European report who also shows the same critical view in Europe, and that's also increasing. So that was just released by the European Union. Of course, that's just like indications which they filled in on a survey. When it comes to real choices in buying behavior, those numbers might be lower, but at least like the social trend goes a little bit in really being aware of those things. And the main point for me is like the top right is like keeping the trust and the trustworthiness is quite important for brands nowadays. Like when you really like mess things up, you're gonna have negative PR. You might not find the talent you need. I think many people are nowadays really intrinsically motivated. They want to have the impact. They want to work for people who really have that impact. And like for Facebook, after Cambridge Analytica, I think their their acceptance rate for new offers really dropped by 2/3, and they really found less talent to work with them. So they also needed to spend more money on working for them. So I think it's a quite important element in here today. And just like the universal business case to really considering more ethics is like increased revenue, because you might have like a better premium brand, so you can charge more money. You have decreased costs, like when you really have a scandal or whatever, it's expensive to really clean up. And then there's a decreased risk, and the decreased risk is on multiple levels. It's like reputation, talent, regulation, but also innovation. I think we need some sustainable innovation today as well. This just some part in terms like of the why it's important that we have responsible tech nowadays. Are there any questions so far in terms of that part before we go into what is responsible product management? Again, like first questions here in the Zoom, but feel free to also put in the questions in LinkedIn and YouTube and the other platforms. If you are in Zoom here, feel free also to ask directly if you want, not putting it in. So not many questions, but some questions. How do you see the reaction of C-suite, I guess, and stakeholders on product management ethics? I think it's coming more and more. I think especially when it comes to the environment, I think there is the attention in there, and they have it on top level and on board level, but quite often they struggle how to translate it down into the organization. So we see responsible product management as a way to really translate the C-suite and board level ambitions to act there into the product organization. And that's quite positive. We also just had one study with the MIT Technology Review, and that was that 73% will think that like ethical considerations and responsible tech considerations will become as important as other business considerations. So really that trade-off is becoming more and more important. Whose interest should come first to product management? Is it the customer or the environment? I think it's the trade-off to do that one. It's the same in terms of like when you see in the Venn diagram, you have the different elements, and I guess the customer-centered approach is like you first look at the person, and I think here's also the trade-off. I think both comes at the same time nowadays. So you really need to see where your customer is, but you need to start to look for trends. So you need to look like, how is the environment of your customer changing over next 10 years? Like what's changing in the environment? How are their habits changing? And really take into the consideration that there are more social aspects and that there are more environmental aspects in there. While the rest is coming in from the other platforms, I go to the next steps, but to have those questions already as one element. What is responsible product management? When we did our research, I think quite a lot of topics come up, and I think I would consider them all under responsible tech. So you have sustainability and green tech in there, you have security, privacy, you have accessibility and inclusive design, you have the ethics and data like bias and AI topics. Then you have like the diversity, equity, inclusion topics, and also some CSR topics, but also the values and like the consequence checking in there. And those are all topics which are related to responsible tech. And I think each of those topics you really could deep dive into that one, and you could run a full program in there. What we try to do with responsible tech and also with responsible product management is like to make it smaller and more manageable, and also to have a little bit a shift left of those topics. And with that one, responsible product management extends product management with a way of working that aligns technology business behavior with environmental, social, societal, and individual interests. And it does that one by including the mindset to consider values, unintended consequences, and negative impacts of tech in order to actively reduce risk and wrongdoing, and also to capitalize on opportunities. So it's not just like you see the risk and you don't do it, but there will be new opportunities. When you really look at the customer, on the environment, on the society in there, you will find new opportunities which is coming up and which will be quite important also for the companies to catch up, because just the customer sentiment will be changing in the future because we have those challenges which are there. And it's not completely like, not to be completely right with everything, but it's moving the needle to the left, like not just like being evil or deceptive or down to evil. I think nowadays we just need to be doing good, or we need to be doing better and considering those topics. So just being neutral, I think nowadays is not the option, because being that neutral and just like, okay, let's see what the market does, is not enough nowadays anywhere more with the challenges we have. So how do we apply that one, and how do we move forward? And for that one, I have got like 3 topics which are important, which helped us to really reduce, like in our experience, to introduce it to companies, and really like little things which really make a big impact. And those are like anticipation, working with values and principles, and having a responsible culture. So those would be the 3 building blocks from our perspective, which really made a big difference in the companies. Excuse me. Working with anticipation. So I guess most of you know that scene, if you're old enough, I assume nowadays. Your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could, that they didn't stop to think if they should. And I think sometimes we are also very much looking into technology and think, wow, that's really, really cool, and that could solve that problem. And as with Ian McCollum in Jurassic Park is saying that one, just like, hey, do we really do that with the genetic engineering? I think it really emphasized the responsibility we have to really think about like what tech solutions we bring into the world, and really think about that, because we are really great problem solver, like all technologies are there. I think we see the problem, and I think we think of the solution. And I think sometimes we really think even more about the problem. And there's always the saying like don't move too fast to the solution, but really think about more about the problem. But I think we also should look into the problems the solution is creating. And sometimes we miss that one, because we finally find the right problem to solve, and we have a solution, and then we try to move on. And I think we really should look into that one, and not just the intended consequences like better usability, increased efficiency in new markets. I think we should also spend some time to think about the unintended consequences. So it might promote addiction. It tricks you into consent, which is decreasing the trust. It increases the carbon footprint. It excludes certain groups, and then you might have social polarization, or it really is an imbalance with partners you might have when you work in a B2B setting. So like having really this unintended consequences. So having a more responsible innovation process, like you anticipate, you come up with different elements, what might go wrong, then you decide, like you can look into the likelihood, how likely it is to happen, how big the impact is. And then you think about like, how do you mitigate that one? Or if you can capitalize on that one, that's also good. Like Apple is really like doubling down on privacy. They have seen there are issues with privacy, and their whole USP goes around privacy, and they really come up with new solutions. So really asking in your process what might be intended and unintended consequences of that one really helps. And you can do that at multiple steps. So when you have a vision, strategy, product, feature, design, implementation, you can ask that. And I think it becomes a mindset, it becomes a habit, which is there in there. And this is also then moving forward, like I think here's this responsible experimentation. What you know is like this build, measure, learn. It's like the agile loop you have, and you just need to add here like some anticipation. So you have some ideas, you anticipate what might be the issues of the solution, then you mitigate and you capitalize, you build it, prototype it. You don't just measure it, but you also monitor the impact you have. Then you have some insights you learn. You have new ideas or new problems you solve. You anticipate once more what might be the issues. And over time, you just build that muscle to think about that one. And it's just another skill we have to learn. But really having that one, it increases your yeah, it increases the responsibility, also like decreases negative effects, possible negative effects you might have. And there are many prompts that can help. So it's a muscle you can do, but there's so much material out there which really can help you and uncover your blind spots. So that are prompts which are provided by .everyone's consequence scanning. So like just some ideas there, like what could this mean to people in their professional life? How could it affect different markets? What could this mean if everyone in the world is doing it? So it's just like it's considering other elements in there when you would scale, and that just helps you to think beyond some elements which you might know. There's another one in here which is really great. It's like from the artifact groups, the tarot cards of tech. So they have different cards in there, and it's really nice to play the card game. Like the forgotten one, when you picture your user base who is excluded if they use your product, what would be their experience? So really think beyond just the first user group, but really like who else can't use that one? Or like going one further, there's also from Omidyar Network, Ethical Explorer. It goes like on data control, surveillance, outside power, addiction, and it just has different cards in there and many questions which you can ask yourself, which is just opening some blind spots that you might have and think outside the box. And here are some things you might find. It's just a very short example in there. Like when you do those exercises, you have like in a team, you might have like 30 to 50 different points. So those are just some examples. Like for internal sales tool, intended consequences is really to reduce the stress and confusion. And the sales people might feel just more valued, but unintended consequences might also just like decrease the transparency in there to the customers, which might be an issue. And on the other side, like they also found that was an actual team that they don't have like a gender neutral language. So some of the sales people, which are women, might just feel excluded, and they change those ones. So those are small things, but they might have a big impact. The same here with the e-commerce tool. So it was like on a big marketplace, e-commerce marketplace in Germany, and we did their whole marketplace in there. And I think the intended consequence was that partners can offer better service to their customers, so that they enable those partners. But they also realized like they have those tools in there to support the partners, and they might also just like exclude some of these partners because they are just smaller. And with this one, they have like more monopoly in there, like there's less choice for the customers. And how can we just like redirect this one? And just this little insight really shifted the backlog of the whole partner tool program. And they really look like, how can we get more balance in? Because they really saw that added value in there for their customers and also for their partners. And some of these things you might find are very obvious for one group of the people, but they're really different and new for other people. And just adding this anticipation step in there opens up the possibility for conversation. Before we go to values and principles, do you have any questions in regards to the anticipation part? When people think about the anticipation part and questions you have, there's still a question in terms like that there are costs in implementing new sustainability measures, and is there more like benefits now or down the line just to do that? And I think when it comes to sustainability in terms of environmental sustainability, I think there's added value when it also comes to financial operations in there, like reducing CPU and processing power is reducing costs in there. So really being aware of like how much resources you use, because in the first step, you always try to reduce the resources. And in the second step, you try to make them green. Having that awareness really brings you some additional like financial benefits to invest in that one. Does anticipation, as explained here, mostly mean that you have it through discovery phase before heading to design. I think it can be in the different phases. I think you can always ask once more, like, what's the consequences of that one? So when you go into discovery and you have like your group of people you interview, you can check if you have blind spots. Hey, what's the consequence when we just ask those people, what might we miss? So you can do that already in the discovery phase, but you can also do it in the design phase again, when you have some designs. Hey, what's the consequences of those things here, what we have designed? So it's really goes through the process. And I think there are multiple steps where you can do a check for the anticipation. And I think it's just a mindset you should start adding in order to get a more systemic perspective on your product, on the work you do. Any other questions? I'm going to go to the values and principles. Please continue to post them. I will pick them up then after the next step. So coming to values and principles, I think many people of you know that making a vision the reality. So described by Martin Kagan. So it's really how you move from vision to delivery. So you have the product vision. It describes the future you are trying to create. You go into the team cuts, you go into the product strategy, team objectives, product discovery, product delivery, and it's just informing yourself, and you can go from the top to bottom. But I would say that's not enough. And I think for many people working in artificial intelligence, you know that like you're adding on top, you set the values and the principles. So you really set what is important, and that guides the action. And I think this having values and principles really gets the foundation of what we do. And I think it should just inform much more of the product delivery, what we do. So you have different values in there, because technology is not neutral, and they can really guide this one. So the values set what's important, and on the left side you can see there's transparency, accountability. There's for those who follow their dream, like freedom, autonomy. That's some element of Porsche, for example, automotive company. It's some of their vision, which also represents the values. There's honesty, trust, and respect in there. And on the right, you have some principles, and the principles really can show what's good and guide your action in there. So you can rightly present the data, you can create a better life for the many people. Those are principles from IKEA, and they really have this equity and inclusion in there. And I think when you look at IKEA, how they design their stores and the offline world, they really put that into action. I think when they look into how to do it virtually, they still can improve there, or they're on the way to find that out. So there's experience of privacy and security. I think that's important for Apple, and to balance tech with business, individual and society and environment, like this responsibility, trust, and accountability, which is in there. So those values really help to guide you, and I think you need a mix of the different elements here. And I think I come in a second why the Porsche example alone is not enough. But when you have those principles in there, like create a better everyday life for the many people, it really helps to guide there. So you really have the values there, and it can inform the problem and feature choice. I think with Porsche, they really looked into that you can opt out of data tracking, and that you can delete your data in here. And also when you have like accessibility topics, like with IKEA, you really can break it down into the product delivery. So it translates into cross-functional requirements and acceptance criteria. So when you have accessibility, can break down into can this feature be used with a screen reader? Can it be used with different accessibility elements? So those values really can go in each of the steps and inform how you navigate, and also how you define your acceptance criteria. What are your goals? And it also, like every feature and its user experience, is a proof of the values and principles for the people. So when you have those values up there, and I think that's with Bumble, so they really have this inclusive company setting out there, and every feature they produce, they see that as a way that people and the users can experience the values they have. So they really look for that alignment of what's the marketing message, but also like what people are experiencing it. Can they experience that one? And then it really connects to your customer experience, which is in there. Going further here, so There are many ways for your values and principles, and you can start it with 1 or 2 values today. And I think when you look at the fluency or maturity, so like a low fluency or maturity is when you have no values explicit. When you have some of the values explicit, that's already increasing. And I think we see with many companies who are more responsible, they have multiple values, they really work with it. So they are explicit and integrated. And they also have this focus on ethics and morality. So when you look at Porsche, they have one really strong value, and that's like more the autonomy. And just autonomy might not be enough. I think there needs to be some moral and ethical elements in there, like when it comes to environmental impact in here. When you look at IKEA, they really want to be more inclusive, so they really have more values here. How you get to the values, so you can use the company values. That's a really good starting point. You can also use anticipation as before, like the ethical explorer. So you really can look at the risk areas, and you can turn those risk areas around and formulate some principles, how you might really like navigate across them. I'll show you an example in a second. Then there is like value sensitive design and value-based engineering. So there's a whole approach to that one, how you can work with values. And there are, of course, are moral values. So like using the Human Rights Charter is a really good start. And also like to look into environmental sustainability nowadays is also a great value to add to your company values or to add to your product values when you can't influence the company value. Going into examples, so like internally we had this carbon dashboard, and then we used from anticipation to the principles. So we used the ethical explorer in there. We used some of the risk zones. We imagined some worst case scenarios, and like using those worst case scenarios, we started to really create a set of principles which the team could use. And some of the principle here is like, we will not knowingly misinterpret the data. We involve those that own the data. We thoroughly check our calculations. We are transparent at how we come up with the figures. So it's also around the trust in there. And that really gave the team some guidance. And you also see like that the principle has won over some overstatement, but it also has more details that can really give some guidance how it could be concretely used. Another example for principles, when you work like with accessibility and inclusivity, there are like the universal design principles. So when that is important for you, you might just check the principles here, and you can use them, and you can see like how relevant are they for our product. And then you can use them. And depending in which industry you work, in which company you work for, which department, for what it is, there might be other risks or principles which are important for you. So it needs a little bit of figuring out. But again, with more exposure and with more experience, you will find your way quite quickly and see what's important and relevant. Before we go to responsible culture, are there any questions when it comes to working with values and principles? Again, first the people here in the Zoom chat, because we have you don't have any delay. But if you are on any of the streaming platforms, feel free to put it in the comments. I'm gonna see it here then with a little bit of delay. Nothing coming for now. I think I will have them with delay, so I go into the responsible culture. If you have questions, put them in. I'm gonna pick the questions up in a second. So the third building block will be the responsible culture, and it's one block in terms like many of the issues that don't fit in the others, but somehow just enable the other parts much more. And I think quite important there is like it sets the foundation and it really extends the other elements. And I think quite important is your own personal ethics and your journey where you are. I think quite often it starts and ends with you. So as a product manager and as a leader, when you don't care about it, I think the rest of your team doesn't care about it. So like, I think you need to be yeah, I think everybody's on a different point with their journey, but this journey really influences the rest of that one. There's a lot about like diversity, equity, and inclusion in there, and teams which are more diverse, they will just easily pick up some of the consequences. It might be that the team with the Apple engineers who built like the AirTag, they didn't have any women in there or just very privileged people. So like anticipating that there might be some stalking might not have crossed their mind. But when they would have had a more diverse team, they might have picked that up because somebody would have raised that voice. So like with more diversity, with more different living realities, you really see more of those topics, and you might consider, like when it comes to value discussions, like a more diverse team will just be more aware about different values and about like different living realities. So that really helps. But it's not the only thing which helps. I think you really need to have that safe space and continuous learning, because when you don't have a safe space in your team, in your company, those people might not speak up. You might have the diversity, but the people are afraid to speaking up. So it's quite important today that we continuously keep learning, because there are emerging technologies with new impacts, but also that we have the safe space which enable the learning, but which also enables people to speak up. Looking at the societal topics, I think it's also good to have like conversation on power dynamics in there, because without knowing the different living realities and like the struggle in the nowadays in the society, I think it's hard to judge and to make like product decisions. And I think nowadays we need to have some more social awareness as product managers and as a company. What do we really like develop it for? Like, what are the challenges of your customers? It's not just about like, how do you solve their problem and how do you make it more efficient? I think most of the technology solutions have more impact than efficiency, and it's changing some of their realities. It's changing how people use Uber. It's changing how people use gorillas. Like it's not just giving them work, but like how does your product really help them further, and what dynamic does it bring in? And the other point, the last one, is like how you work with others and honor their expertise. I think there's a difference in between asking a user and really listening to a user. And I think there's also a difference in asking some people who are effective and really take their element and their expertise. You might not have the expertise with some of the with the minorities you work with, but really honoring their perspective and getting in a more on eye level co-creation and helping them in their reality. I think it's quite important to bring that in and to change the mindset there and really work together with the people is a very important point. So yeah, anticipation, values and principles, and the culture, responsible culture, are the key elements nowadays. Before I go to the summary and wrap up, are there any questions with the responsible culture you might have for, again, with values and principles? We can also, when you put them in, I can also answer them in the following Q&A then. So there's even more, and maybe that's another one. Like anything I missed, I framed those puzzle pieces or the foundations as puzzle pieces. And what do you think what else needs to be considered? Please post it in the chat or in the video comments, because there's so much, and there are blind spots I have myself as well, which are quite important. So what would you say, what's missing to become more responsible as a product manager, or like generally as product management profession? Values and principles are there. Yeah, we have this one. What else? Anything you could think of? Working with stakeholders, another one, yes. Also, how you include the people might be much more, like diversity might be a much bigger topic than just like the responsible culture. I think many people mention it. Anything else? continuous learning, I find quite important. Yes. Keep them going in the chat and in the comments of the video. I really would love to check more. So if you see more, I also would like to keep learning. And I think I've got many blind spots as well. And I think it's good to honor that expertise, what you might bring in, what's not in here. So in terms of summarizing, like responsible product management is key today because value is changing and we really have to skate to where the puck is going to be. And that's really with the environmental challenges and also with the companies you work with, your own companies, there's a shift in terms like we need to become more environmental friendly. Plus, we have to look into like the social inequality. So I think quite a lot of the issues we have to do today are based on exploitation. And I think we need to change our practices today in order to create a better future there. Again, the impact of technology is larger today and there's more responsibility. 20 years ago, when you did build a product, there have been only a couple of hundred users. Today, when you build a product, it has a much more central role. So people might be using it a couple of days, a couple of hours every day, and it's used by many, many more people. And I think with that impact, there's just much more responsibility. And people care. So people nowadays really care about companies, what they do. And there are quite some expectations. And the media and journalists are looking as well. So really like keeping people's trust is essential. So like really acting there and really your marketing office will be quite happy that you have that on mind as well. Like how do we keep the trust of people? And how do we keep that one? It takes ages to build up some trust of a company, but when you have a security breach, when people doubt your privacy, when they see some shady practices where you do shortcuts, people are switching nowadays. They really are going and they are really leaving the product. So I think switching costs are just like changing and people are caring and they really change that. And where to start if you wonder where you want to be when you are a leader. So you can really ask yourself, are anticipation, value and principles and our responsibility culture really explicitly addressed in your general strategy and practice? And if they are not addressed, like how can they be addressed? So how can you update your strategy? How can you update your processes that they are addressed in there? If you're a practitioner, you can do easily like an anticipation session. And when you Google for the responsible tech playbook, there's a whole playbook of different methods you can use. And just do that session with your product, on your product, and there will be new ideas, elements which you haven't considered, and that's really good to do that. You can also look into your company values, and you can transform that into like a product principles, and you start working with, or you can just create more values with the anticipation session you do. And you can also discuss who should be your next member in the team to really increase the diversity of your team. When you're a very homogeneous team, like how can you change that one? And how can you really like make a difference there? So those are different points you can just start with. In this one, thank you very much. I think there are many people who have contributed to my thinking here. So quick shout out in here, pause it, read through who are most of the sources and the influence. And yes, that's the end. If you have any questions, I think I really love that quote from William James, psychologist. So act as if what you do makes a difference, because it really does make a difference. Thank you very much.
Alexander, thank you so much. That was fantastic. I'm going to share my screen again, so if you don't mind. One moment.
So if you have any questions, put in the questions. We're going to see the questions in the chat, and in a minute I will have some time to answer to those while John is sharing some background on product people again, I think.
There it goes. Exactly. Yep. So again, thank you so much. I found that to be fantastic. And as Alexander had just suggested, please continue to enter in your questions in the chats, and we'll do some Q&A. Just a moment, I want to tell you a bit more about product people. And I'm having a bit of a lag issue, so apologies, everybody. There's some oddities happening with my computer. Here we go. So, we are product people, as I had stated previously before. We are a product consultancy firm, but we're a little bit different than your typical product consultancy firm in that we offer interim fractional product managers. So that means, we're not coming in and just giving a strategy or a playbook of some sort. We're actually running your product management operations as an interim role in the event of, somebody going on altern leave, parental leave, somebody being potentially sick for a long period of time, or maybe there's perhaps you're in Germany and there's a long lag period between giving somebody an offer and then being able to actually join the team. What do you do to ensure that the wheels keep spinning, so to speak? You bring in product people. That is our main function. We also do product consulting and coaching, where we come in and we teach best practices, right? You've been part of this group today, learning something amazing from our product organization, from some of our contributors. Thank you again, Alexander. But we come in and we also teach, hey, what are some standard practices for getting your roadmap up to speed and ensuring that you or your team has the appropriate product culture, learning how to do product discovery and so on. And we will do product discovery for organizations as well. Now, what we're not doing, we're not recruiters, right? We're not a freelance marketplace. When you are hiring product people, you're hiring us as a product trio. That means that you not just get me or somebody else from the team, you're getting several of us that work with your organization. So in the event that somebody has to step away, the wheels still keep churning. You're not totally dependent on one freelancer who is filling that interim. You're actually getting us as an organization. And we do not do development or design. We are simply focused on product management. Some of our clients that we have worked with in the past, where we've done this, some names you've probably heard of, and those are some on the B2B side as well, like WHO. Got a lot of positive feedback from our clients. I won't read through those. Tons of product people stats. And look at us. We're all just so wonderful. Look at those smiling, happy faces. Wouldn't you love for us to be working with you? And we're hiring. So Andre, if you could please enter into the chat our product people information, as well as my contact information. If anybody wants to reach out to me directly about opportunities working with product people, you're more than welcome to do so. And now back to the Q&A. Thank you, everybody. We have a question that just popped up in the chat from Andrea and LinkedIn. I think almost all product companies have values and posters that say they value, but how do you make sure that they really come first in informing the product development process?
It's a good question, and I think it's up to the product team you have. So like in your inception, or like even now, like really at the beginning when you start with the product or during the element, like you need to break those values down into principles, and then really see like what does it mean for us? Like what does it mean having some inclusive design elements, or like inclusivity in company values? What does it mean for our product? What does it mean to be environmentally sustainable? Where might this product not be? Like what does this principle, what does it mean in concrete cases? And when you break down it in principles and think about different cases, you really get the guidance there. And then it's just learning. It informs your discovery. And you might even see there might be some principles which you really put into the acceptance criteria, as mentioned before, when you have like inclusive design. So is your acceptance criteria, is that function usable with a screen reader? And I think that helps your developer and your design people to really think about those steps. And with every story, it just becomes one part of having that, then it's part of the acceptance criteria and part of your product.
Awesome. Alexander, thank you so much for your time. I've got kind of one last little silly question, perhaps, or maybe not, given your expertise and given the awesomeness of this topic. I just kind of wanted to get your opinion on the current status of automated intelligence or of AI and how that might have a social or potential environmental impact, given that it's poised to be disruptive in so many industries. And I just kind of want to get your sense of, your perspective on the usage of AI and how to ensure that we're producing not so disruptive in a negative way technologies.
I think there are 2 points to it, and one part is what you can do in the company, and one part is what is outside. I think responsible tech is one part in the company, but it has another dimension, which is like informing and educating other people, like lawmakers and the general society about technology. And I think we are very privileged and we understand technology, and I think we need also to enable other people to really have that conversation and really to give that one. And I think some of the market dynamics need to be mitigated and also done by regulation. And I think it's not just a market force. So that's one important part, that we also engage in there as citizens, not just as product managers and technologists, but also that we play our role as citizens and be able to help other people and help in that civil society process what we have, and in the democratic process we have. When it comes in terms of inside that one, I think it's also how you measure responsible tech, and there are different elements in there. So you really can ask your customer, do you trust us? And does it really help you to what you achieve? But like, trust is an important question, and what might be elements where you might lose the trust, and you might see there comes to privacy, to other dodgy elements. Do you influence me in there where people really have doubts, and you can respond in there. You can also measure when it comes to risk and to compliance risk level. So what might be like some compliance exposure you might have, some regulatory fines which are there, and what is the probability of that one. I think many companies try to be ahead. They know a regulation is coming, and it's very expensive to change some elements. I think even for Deutsche Bahn, for example, they only had like male and female and not that third option, and it's really, they got fines on a daily basis when they didn't have it. And even just adding that option cost them like $1 million in development money because they forgot it in the beginning. And sometimes small things are very expensive. So you might to think ahead what's in there, like what's coming. That also in terms of the impact of the reputation index. So really the value of the brand, like brand recognition, brand value, employee engagement. I think those are all things you need to consider nowadays and before they are happening. And I think this you should keep in mind also when you develop like AI, that there's more coming up, and there's the conversation and like keeping here the trust and being ahead of regulation, next to be really like interacting as a citizen, and really you have a privileged role working in tech, and really like enable other people to really make good decisions when it comes to technology.
Fantastic answer, fantastic presentation. I want to again thank you so much on behalf of myself and the rest of the product people community. I think this was incredibly insightful, very valuable. I certainly learned a lot. I think I'm speaking for the community when I say they probably did as well. Unfortunately, we're at time. Otherwise, we would love to continue this conversation. Obviously, we're super happy to have you, and would love to welcome you back in the future to discuss other things.
Thank you for having me. If anyone has
forward.
any question, please feel free to reach out. And yeah, have still a nice day.